So I start off by speaking to our friend Nyama, who is a producer with the BBC Africa Eye team, who actually produced this BBC documentary to understand why they undertook this investigation into the work of the IJM and what exactly they found. Hello, good evening, our friend Nyama. Welcome to Point Blank.
Good evening, Salam. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's been a while we spoke, and I guess you're doing well at the BBC where you are now.
I'm doing fantastic. Yourself?
Yes, I'm well by God's grace. I read the report you filed after the documentary, and the opening paragraphs of that report actually, they are heart wrenching. I mean, to say the least. Let me just take a few paragraphs, then you can help us appreciate them properly. You said a little after midnight on the 6th September 2022, Musa Mustafa emerged from his thatched roof hut to relieve himself and saw 4 cars speeding towards his tiny village. Mojina was barely a village with just about a handful of family homes and 24 people in total. It was more like a dot in the middle of an expanse of farmland in northern Ghana. Cars were a rare sight during the day, let alone at night. Musa hid behind a tree and watched. When he saw armed men from the cars approach the 2 homes, he shouted in an attempt to wake the other residents. But before anyone could act, the men entered the hut and forcibly removed 4 children, carrying an 11-year-old girl called Fatima by her arms and legs from the room where she had been sleeping with grandparents. A gun pointed at her neck. Fatima's grandmother, Sana, pleaded with the men. She did not understand why the children were being taken away. 2 of the children's uncles were also taken. Sana feared she would never see her relatives again. In the eyes of the Mojina villagers, a violent kidnapping had taken place, but that was not a kidnapping. So that really is your narration of what the IGM will call a rescue mission. So what actually motivated your investigation into this particular incident or rescue mission?
Ago, sources close to the operations and activities of IGM, specifically in Ghana, drew the attention of the BBC Africa Eye team to situations they described as worrying so far as the operations of IGM is concerned. So we then got to work and did speak to additional sources. And for example, I visited some of these islands under consideration so far as IGM's operations in Ghana is concerned, spoke to affected families who said they had been affected by the quote-unquote rescue missions of IGM, and also some of the children who narrated incidents to us. And this then triggered the next stage of the investigation, which was the undercover operation. And this was not a decision we took lightly. Of course, it was in the public interest, and we needed to corroborate the initial evidence we had gathered. And so if you have seen the documentary, what happened next was for the BBC Africa Eye team to send one of our colleagues to work at the IGM offices in Accra, posing as an intern. This gave us also the opportunity to monitor at first hand the operations of IGM. For example, text message, WhatsApp messages, because our operative had access to an IGM phone. And that is the outcome of the months and weeks of this investigation. Subsequently, my colleague, Chenchahene Boating, who is a reporter in this investigation, also visited some of the communities in Nakpale area, went back to Chiaman From in the Afram Plains area, and so on, to gather additional evidence. So that gives you a clear idea of the amount of work that has gone into this for more than 2 years. in total, really. And to talk about the specific cases we identified and we focused on in terms of IGM's operation, what you talked about and referred in that article was Operation Hilltop, which was just last year in September 2022. There was also Operation Freedom, which was in a Chiamanfro, in a Afram Plains area. That was in October 2019. We also focused on an IGM operation in April 2017, which was in the Pala Island and surrounding communities. Now, let me break it down and give you the details in terms of the main highlights of our documentary and our findings. In Operation Hilltop, which was in Moina. Moina is a village in the Napale area in the northern region. This was a dawn operation by IGM. So, yeah. And in this operation, 4 kids were removed. And according to the grandmother of 2 of the kids, that's Fatima, who you see in our documentary, when the IGM team entered their heart, barged into their heart at that time of the day, they did not identify themselves. They did not say who they were. They did not talk about their mission there. And according to the grandmother of Fatima, the IGM team pointed a gun at her throat. Fatima was then held by her hands and her legs, and she was taken away together with her sibling. And the 2 other children were also removed and separated from their families. Now, what is interesting, another point we raise in this documentary relative to the Operation Hilltop, is that prior to that operation, and as is evidenced in the documentary, the International Justice Mission's office in Accra, Ghana, had written to the Department of Social Welfare indicating that they had found 4 cases of child trafficking. And this was what led to that particular operation. But we identify, and we have evidence presented in the documentary, that prior to that operation, IGM officials knew that 3 of the cases did not fit the child trafficking, criteria. Yet they wrote to the Department of Social Welfare, and based on that information, that operation was carried out. If you listen to the narration of the grandmothers, they say they did not know where the children were. They made attempts and efforts to know where the children had been taken to. In fact, not only that, 2 of the uncles of the children faced prosecution. And eventually, that prosecution was discontinued by the prosecutors for suggesting lack of evidence. But they say that they spent about 1,500 cedis each time they had to come to Accra for the court hearings. In regard to the this same operation again, Selom, the residents of Moina tell the BBC Africa Eye team, and in the conversation with my colleague Chensha Heneboateng, that the chief of the village died out of shock after the kids were taken away. In fact, they say that the IGM team barged into his heart in a very disrespectful manner as well. Now let's look at
yes, I wish I had a lot of time, but I think your narration on Operation Hilltop provides us enough further to progress our discussion. So maybe I just want to thank you. We'll get back to you a bit later if we need to. But I think your information on the Operation Hilltop gives us enough basis to engage the IGM on the matters. So, Alfred, thanks so much for speaking to us, and thanks so much for the job you do at BBC Africa Eye. Thank you so much. We'll speak again some other time. All right.